CO2. 5, 4, 3.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we'll be discussing how to set up your fighting rifle as a general purpose rifle. And here for us today, I have my general purpose rifle, or a GPR for short. Now, before I go into the details on why it is set up the way it is, it's important that we first discuss and understand what makes for a GPR. Now, the general purpose rifle, or as it's often referred to as a do-it-all rifle, is not going to excel at one particular thing. I mean, it's going to do well in the mid-range, but it is not going to be a close quarters proficient rifle. It's also not going to be a DMR, SPR, sniper rifle, anything of that nature. So it's important to understand that there are limitations, both, again, on the short end and the long end of that spectrum. However, there is still a really great way we can outfit these rifles to do really everything but well enough. Now, it's in my opinion that there are two components that make for a general purpose rifle. Similar to how I said in the SPR video, you have the barrel, the optic, and the ammunition. For a general purpose rifle, it is the optic and it is your barrel. Specifically, the barrel's length. Because we want a barrel that is going to make the rifle maneuverable, handy, that sort of deal, for whether it's close quarters, vehicles, transportation purposes, so on. You want a barrel that's short enough to let you do that. Especially when you have a suppressor, you want to be conscientious of that. But it also has to be long enough to where you're going to be able to perform consistently at the mid-range and at those intermediate distances. So for me, this is a 14.5. The shortest that I would go for a GPR's barrel would be 13.7. Now, as it pertains to my 14.5 and the ammunition that I feed through it, which is 77 grain OTMs, my muzzle velocity is 2569. Might sound a little short, a little low for some of you guys who understand, well, muzzle velocities, but this is again with 77s. A little bit heavier than your standard 55 grain, 62 grain ammunition, so our muzzle velocity is a little bit on the lower end. That said, if you're shooting 55 grain pills, you'd be around 26, 27, maybe higher, 2800 feet per second. But again, we're at 2569 feet per second with this rifle. Now, the second component that's going to make your GPR a GPR is having a proper optic. The optic, you guys, is what decides what you and your rifle are going to excel at. So you have three popular choices for your optic. You have the red dot magnifier, great way to go for shorter carbines. You have the ACOG, which I'm a big fan of ACOGs. However, to make consistent hits, especially those first or second round impacts at intermediate distances, you want to be able to compensate for wind. And ACOGs, unless you have the ACSS reticle, do not allow you to do that. Despite their great field of view, lightweight, reliability, so on and so forth, the reticles are, again, a little too rudimentary for our purposes. So in this case, we have the last option, an LPVO. This particular LPVO is the United Force Attacker 1-8. It is a tank of an optic, so it's a little on the heavy side. That said, it provides a great reticle, the FCDMX, which is an absolute improvement over the FCDM reticle. Additionally, this optic is a first focal plane optic, which I'll speak on briefly. Now, if you're unfamiliar, a first focal plane optic differs very, very much from a second focal plane. Now, a second focal plane, most commonly, Vortex Razor. You also have the Sig Tango MSR, the 1-6. So those are some great second focal plane optics. However, my issue with second focal plane optics as it relates to, well, a GPR is that our zero is not true at any of the distances that we do not zero at. Example, if you zero at, say, 8 power and you want to make a shot at 4 power, well, your zero is not true. So there's a little bit of compensation in there, a little bit of extra work, I think, on the part of the shooter to avoid any kind of sloppiness. So for me, a LPVO, such as the Attacker, does a great job in kind of eliminating that concern, that time, so on and so forth. Lets me be more consistent in what it is that I'm doing. That said, first focal plane also has a great reticle feature in that at 1 power you have a circle dot reticle, and you also have at max magnification a military-esque reticle with the FCDMX. And at max magnification, It's providing us enough information to, again, make consistent impacts. So we have wind dots, so on and so forth. And we also have at 1 power a clean, simplistic, eye-catching reticle that is not going to be too overwhelming in terms of information for those 1 power ranges. So it is for those reasons that I refer to the LPVO as a do-it-all sort of optic. In terms of the 1 power, you usually have a fairly true 1 power, and at the max magnification, you have enough information, parallax feature, so on and so forth, clarity, to make consistent impacts where you don't need a proper rifle scope, any 4-16, 3-18, so on and so forth. Now this does bring us to illumination, because again, with the 1 power, you want to be able to have a red dot to be quick, deal with bright conditions outside, so on and so forth. In the Night Force Attacker 1-8, the illumination is fantastic. As you can see in this video, we are shifting from 1 to 10. There's a dead stop in between, so you can turn it off without having to rotate all the way back to 0. The Attacker has great illumination, certainly daylight bright. Now, for me as a shooter, I'm generally shooting around high noon during the day in the desert. Pretty bright conditions overall. And for illumination, I'm generally around 8 to 9 power. I've only used 10 power once, and that was just to demonstrate to you guys how bright it is. I mean, I would consider it to be like aimpoint T2 levels of bright. So if daylight bright is a concern for you in your LPVO, the Attacker 1-8 is a great option. Now, the Attacker out of the way, you might be wondering, why do you have an offset red dot, right? Your illumination is so bright with the Attacker, reticle so good. Why have the added cost, weight, etc. of a red dot? And there's a few reasons, and they do overlap with some of the reasons I highlighted in the SPR video. So the first reason is that you have a secondary optic. If the Attacker broke for whatever the reason is, very unlikely, and if that happened and you're still alive, I don't know what's going on, but maybe the optic became unzeroed. You would still have a secondary aiming solution. So you do have that. The other reason is that you have a reference point for when you're deep in magnification. So if I'm at max power and I don't have to back off the magnification, instead of having to do that, I can just simply bring my cheek up, overlay the red dot on the target or the general area I think the target is in, bring it back down to the main optic, and I can find it much easier, much quicker. I do recognize that a red dot is sort of an expensive way to go about doing that. However, you don't have to go with an acro P2 like I did. You can do a holosun, you can do a RMR, all those things work. Now the third reason for a backup red dot such as this only applies to you if you have night vision. If you have night vision and you want to use your rifle passively, this means you're not using a laser aiming module, you need a backup red dot, and preferably a, well, quality red dot. So RMR's pretty good, SROs are okay, Delta Point Pros, holosuns. Your mileage may vary, but I found that the best clarity for those is with the Acro P2. Steiner MPS is also pretty good, but I'm more of an Acro guy. That being said, if you want to aim passively with your rifle, you need a red dot. Yes, the Attacker does have 2 night vision settings, however, it is very difficult to use those, because you have to bear in mind, this has a eye relief, 3.7 inches actually, and it's also a giant tube, and for you to get behind it with your night vision tubes it's not a recipe for fun. You really can't do any drills, any dynamic drills, anything that involves movement to any extent or comfort while using a magnified optic with night vision. It just doesn't really work unless it's a clip-on. So with the LPVO and the red dot out of the way, you might be wondering, what the heck is this right here? This is an anti-cant device. In other words, it's a bubble level. This particular anti-cant device is from Accuracy First, Todd Hodnett's company. I'm a big fan of it. So it attaches onto the LPVO scope body itself and has a really refined way of seeing where your cant is. And if you watch the SPR video or you just practice good fundamentals as a shooter in general, you understand that consistency lends itself very, very much to accuracy. So if you're throwing shots, you're missing, a factor could be your breathing, trigger control, lots of different factors go in there, and definitely one of them is your cant. If your cant isn't level between your shot string and you're missing, your cant might be a factor. So it's a great design, very robust, very refined, definitely recommend it. And for those of you wondering, the scope mount I'm using is a Reptilia AUS mount. Now one thing that it does do better than its competitors in my opinion is that if you're looking to add any kind of 12 o'clock mount, be it a diving board or specifically an offset red dot, instead of having to buy a top ring adapter plus a plate for the optic you're looking to put on, all you have to do is just buy the top ring. The top ring specifically that's milled for your particular red dot. It's less cost for me as a user because I'm not having to buy so many adapter plates. There's also less potential points of failure because obviously the more plates, the more screws need to be torqued down, Loctited, that sort of deal. And you're also reducing unnecessary height, just because, as you can see here, it's already pretty tall. I mean, it's at a perfect height to clear the elevation turret. That being said, it could be even taller if there was a unnecessary height spacer or anything like that in there. Overall, great scope mount, definitely recommend it. Now, in front of our optics package, we do have this little guy, which you might be wondering what the heck it is. So this is a TACOM HQ Alpha Tarac. This is a 9 MOA model. And what it is a flip up prism lens that, in layman's terms, adds elevation to your zero without having to actually adjust your optic. For this rifle shooting 77 grain OTM ammunition, at 500 yards, it adds 2.5 mils of elevation. And at 1,000 yards, it adds roughly 5 mils. So our reticle offers us 10 mils of usable reticle and another 5 to 10 more mils within the reticle itself. So there's no mil tree down there. However, if you do want to use, say, the wind dots at the 10 mil mark, but you're at 15 mils, well, flip this guy up and then you have plus 5 mils at 1,000. That sort of deal. You can see in this video right here, I was making impacts. I had 3 impacts out of 10 rounds using the Alpha Tarac. Without the Alpha Tarac being up, to make an impact at 1,000 yards, I was at 20 mils of elevation. So overall, a very cool product. I'm not sponsored by them. I just thought I'd give them a little shout out because it's been very useful for me. Now, in front of all this, we do have our laser aiming module white light setup. First, I will discuss the white light just because it is more pertinent to a majority of you guys than a laser aiming module. The light I have right here is a Surefire M640 dual fuel turbo. Dual fuel just means you can use rechargeable batteries like 18650s or 18350s, and you can also use CR123s. So this guy does both. You will see a little bit of a dim, a little bit less power output with the 123s compared to rechargeables, but that said, you can use both to operate the light, which is pretty cool. Now, the turbo in name means that this light is a high candela offering compared to Surefire's other lights. And with the M600 dual fuel from Surefire, that is a high lumen offering, about 1,500 lumens. I'm not sure what the candela rating is for that because it's not listed online. That said, the M600 dual fuel, as you can see in this video, has a lot of flood and spill, which beyond 100 yards is not very usable. Where the M640 dual fuel turbo, this guy offers a lot of throw. So up to 200, even 300 yards, you can still fairly accurately PID with the naked eye. Obviously, magnified optic helps. But basically what we're getting with a high candela light is more throw, more of a spotlight effect out to distance. So conversely, lumens will be our flood and spill. Candela, again, spotlight, throw, so on. Another pro to this light is that it does include a swivel body from Surefire. Any of the pro lights, whether it's the M640 dual fuel turbo, M600 dual fuel pro, or M340 Vampire, they will include this pro mount, which is essentially a swivel offset mount that uses a tension screw in the front to allow you to basically on the fly adjust where your white light is on the rifle. So I can have it down here. I can also bring it up, and preferably about right here is pretty good, just because I can now clear the diffuser caps on the end goal, and I can still access the locking collar on the suppressor. So all in all, a great mount. I haven't had it swivel freely or come loose, and I've had a lot of rounds on this rifle and other rifles that do use the Pro swivel mount. Now on the back end of the white light, we do have a Surefire DS00 switch. The DS00 switch is really great because it offers a manual override for your white light. So if, say, your mod button or Unity taps failed, you could still use your light. Another pro for this tail cap is that there are no flickering or dimming issues that I've seen with like the UE cap. So if you're at all concerned about that, definitely invest into the DS00 switch. I mean, it's worth it alone to me just because you have the manual override. That said, again, every time I've seen someone complain about their mod light or their Surefire light flickering, it's been with the UE cap. So make of that what you will. Feeding into the DS00 switch is a mod button from Mod Light. I'm a big fan of it, though the housing is not the factory housing from Mod Light. This is an HRF Concepts recessed mount, which is really cool because it reduces the white light ND potential for these kinds of switches, which on a fighting rifle is a valid concern. There's no shortage of photos or testimony from operators who use the standard Z68 clicky style cap just because that offers more assurance for them not to have an ND with their white light. I think the HRF housing kind of helps that a lot, and I think if you just practice enough discipline, you will not have NDs, just like you won't have NDs with your rifle. So now moving on to the laser, this is the L3 Technologies Engul. The Engul is a great performer. I have a video in the works on the Engul and other competing lasers. Now, the reason behind the naming next generation aiming laser is that unlike older units like the PEG 15 or Steiner units, so on and so forth, that use LED diode based emitters, the Engel uses VC-SEL technology, which is undoubtedly superior, which if you're familiar with IR units on the market, you probably have seen that used in the mall. The malls really popularized that technology. Malls are great, and like I said, video in the works on kind of showcasing this against that one and a few others, so stay tuned for that. 10 out of 10 would love it if Elf would make a civilian version. I've been hearing rumors of that for years, and maybe it's just hopeless speculation, but that would be really cool to see. While light and laser out of the way, let's talk about the suppressor. Suppressor is real fast, you guys. Obviously, they serve to reduce the decibel volume of gunshot, and if it's a quality suppressor, it will displace the sound of the gunshot where it came from. And lastly, they serve to also reduce the visual signature, as any suppressor of quality, permitting it's not titanium, generally does much better at reducing flash than the best of flash hiders. It just is what it is. So if signature is a concern to you on a fighting rifle, which it should be, suppressors should be on the priority list. Now, I understand that they're not available for everybody. I mean, the cost of entry, it's up there. They're a little expensive, and they're not legal in every state, unfortunately. So that reality is what it is. Hopefully it changes soon. Now, this particular suppressor is a Surefire Mini 2, which is a shorter version of the full-size RC2. RC2 is one of the most, I would say, the best suppressors on the market, just because it's incredibly durable. It's very effective. They're very hard to kill. I mean, ask me how I know. You see in this photo right here, I have one that took a big old dent. It's a story for another day. Now, as to why I chose the Mini 2 over the full-size RC2, a couple of reasons. First of which is weight reduction. We're saving about 3.5 ounces going from the full size to the shorter version, which sounds inconsequential, but trust me, the more weight you have out the front of your rifle, no matter how much it is, it does make a difference when it's a little bit less. So that's one factor. The other one is size. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, a 14.5, any short mid-length rifle should be somewhat handy, somewhat maneuverable, and compact. So stock broken in, you can see it's fairly compact. Obviously the full size is going to add 2 more inches to this package, and it does after a while become, well, pretty long. With a full size RC2 on a 14.5, you're looking at 20 inches in barrel. So consider that a full size M16 for reference. Additionally, a 14.5 is really the shortest I'd go for a K size suppressor, a short size suppressor that is, because we have enough powder burn with our barrel length. So we have pretty good decibel reduction. We also have good enough flash suppression because we're not having so much powder go out the front end of the rifle. So that's my opinion. You can differ. Now, is this a hearing safe suppressor on a 14.5? No, it's not. In my opinion, as it pertains to 5.56, you should always wear hearing protection. I've done it without it. It's foolish of me because my tinnitus has definitely gotten worse. Now, some folks might add down in the comments that their favorite suppressor is hearing safe with 5.56, and maybe it is, but your hearing is something that you don't get back, so do with that what you will. Now, with our suppressor removed, you can see just how much shorter this overall package becomes, especially if you have like a Lawfold or anything else like that. But in terms of a full-size shooting rifle, this is pretty short, very compact, very handy. I mean, this is a very comfortable setup to use. But as it pertains to flash hiders and muzzle devices, if you're going to be suppressed all the time, muzzle brakes do work. However, on a fighting rifle, I said this in the SPR video, on a fighting rifle, I think a flash hider is the only real option. Just because should anything happen to your suppressor, you will still have an effective flash hider. Now, in my case, I've chosen a Surefire 3-prong flash hider, which does make the tuning fork sound. However, that's not a problem if you actually suppress it, and really it's not a problem at all if you are not suppressed, but I know some people don't like that. That being said, why did I choose the 3-prong flash hider over a closed tine or a war comp? The reasons is that the closed tine and war comp flash hiders from Surefire, they lack labyrinth seals. Labyrinth seals are these little rings above the flats of the flash hider, and their job is to prevent carbon from going underneath the locking collar of the suppressor where it indexes and causing carbon buildup, well, excessive carbon buildup. And if that happens, it can make it very difficult to remove your suppressor. Or if you do remove your suppressor, you put it back on again, you might not have the best fitment and you might have a baffle strike because of this carbon buildup. So with that said, flash hider, suppressor mount maintenance is definitely important. I've left mine pretty filthy just to show you guys what it looks like when, well, you've gone to the point where you should probably clean your flash hider. For me, I usually use CLR, let it sit for about a day, then use a wire brush and clean it all off. And you want to do that probably every 500 or 1,000 rounds max just to avoid this kind of excessive buildup. And below our flash hider is a Picatinny mount. They don't weigh a whole lot, and what they do is let you mount a bipod whenever you want it. In my case, I use the Atlas BT46 PSR bipod, which is a QD bipod. QD is superior to M-LOK or Keymod in terms of mounting a bipod, just because it's much more efficient to remove it, switch it off, so on and so forth, where M-LOK, Keymod takes some time, some finagling. Picatinny is just very simple. Also, you have cross compatibility with quad rail type setups. So if you're not using quad rails, maybe your buddy is, he needs a bipod, lend it to him, he can use it. Picatinny mount aside, this does bring us to our sling. On a rifle like this, really any rifle that's not a PDW, you want a 2-point sling. In my opinion, this is non-negotiable. Just like a white light on a rifle or handgun for PID, keeping your weapon to you with a sling is non-negotiable. So in this case, this is a Faro Concept Slingster. Great 2-point sling, they've been out for years. Really, all 2-point slings are about the same. You have 2 points, maybe it's padded, maybe it's not. Maybe the pulley mechanism is a little bit bigger, smaller, whatever it is, they're all about the same. So pick your favorite color, camo, just make sure it's a proper 2-point. Now moving to the back of the rifle, we do have the stock. And stocks for most people are very subjective. I originally started off with a Magpul CTR for this rifle. Then I realized for any kind of intermediate distance shooting, I needed a cheek weld. So I went to the Magpul SLS, realized it didn't have enough cheek weld, which led me to the B5 Soft Mod, which in my opinion has the best cheek weld, specifically the enhanced model. It's a little pricey, it's a little heavy, but for me, having that extra weight in the back kind of helps balance everything out on the front. And one cool feature, a couple cool features actually, of the B5 Soft Mod Enhanced is that aside from having storage tubes along the cheek rest of the stock, there are options out there for a replaceable butt pad that have a tool in them. The tool you see here is by Multitasker Tools, features a 1/2-inch hex ring. You also have a castle nut spanner wrench for your castle nut, should that become loose, a little flathead, and a debris cleaner, say for your bolt face or bolt carrier. I like having tools on me, and I've definitely seen worse ways that are more, let's say, invasive of keeping them on your rifle or your person. So, great job to them. Moving forward to the lower receiver. Lowers, you guys, are nothing to go too crazy or spend a ton of money on if you don't have to, just because at the end of the day, they all do the same thing for the most part. This is an LMT Mars L, which is a ambidextrous lower. I like the ambidextrous controls just because if I'm in the prone, being able to hit the bolt stop or bolt release with the same side firing hand is a nice bonus. That being said, it's not an essential. As long as your lower's in spec, you're fine. If you don't know what that means, it just means that your mags are dropping freely, your trigger pins aren't walking, that sort of deal. This does bring me to the trigger. Trigger is a Geisley SSAE. If you've been shooting for years, you probably know the SSAE, you probably shot one at this point. Now, as for the safety, because I'm sure someone's going to ask, this is a ambidextrous safety from Knight's Armament Company. Why have an ambidextrous safety as a right-handed shooter or a left-handed shooter? Well, if you're using a same-side grip, right? Well, if you're using a same-side grip, as I am in this video, you can see that there is a benefit to being able to run the safety quicker with the same side. And what that does for you as a shooter is it makes you a little bit faster at engaging your target, just because you're not having to change or switch up your grip to go from safe to fire. So that's my reason for the ambi safety. However, I understand the concern that some people have that ambidextrous safeties just increase likelihood to go from safe to fire when you don't want to. And the same thing applies to ambi controls like bolt release or magazine release. As it pertains to the Mars L lower, I have 10,000, probably 15,000 rounds combined on all these rifles that have these lowers, and I've been using kit for a while. I've never had magazines drop freely from like a plate carrier bumping into it, but again, I understand the concern that some people have that if you don't need it, why have it, sort of thing. So that's about it for this rifle. Only other thing I can tell you guys about it is that on all my rifles that have surefire suppressors, I use a PRI gas busting charging handle. Just because what they do for you as a shooter is they help bleed off that gas in a direction that your face really isn't in. And if you've never used the PRI gas buster, I definitely recommend it. If you have any kind of traditional baffle stack suppressor like a RC2, a Sandman, AEM5, whatever it is, these suppressors put a lot of gas back into the system, which means that gas is going to your face. And what the PRI does is it has a little vent that goes off to the right side of the receiver. So for you right-handed shooters, you're not getting gas, well, you're not getting as much gas to the face. There are, of course, other models out there like Radians SD, you have silencer codes, tons of options out there. I've just had the best success with the PRI. And that's the rifle, you guys. This is, in my opinion, one of the best ways you can set up a general purpose rifle. And I want to give a big shout out to HREF Concepts. Great guy, great products, but it is because of him that we have this video. He sent out the Night Force Attacker setup with the Alpha Tarac and the Engulf for review purposes. And like I said, it wouldn't have happened without him. So thanks, man. So if you guys have any questions on this rifle, anything that I said, or anything you disagree with, feel free to leave it down below in the comments. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say. I'm curious how you set up your GPRs, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and so on. And like always, you guys, I really appreciate the support. The channel is relatively new and it's had a lot of growth so far, and that's because of you guys. So if you want to continue supporting the channel, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, all that stuff helps. And if you have any questions that are more pertinent and you need an answer sooner, just head over to Instagram over at Dim Desert Nights, where I get notifications a little bit quicker, a little more consistently than I do here on YouTube. I'm happy to answer. But all that said, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.